I just want to say thank you to everyone that's been praying for me, and I'm thankful for you guys. I just wanted to come on here and share this information that I thought was very prophetic. And you've already heard this story already about China tests space-bound hypersonic missile, strengthening theory they are sons of KETURAH. I'm sure you've already heard about the hypersonic missile that they tested. But this information goes further and deeper into the prophetic. The article states, it was recently revealed that in August, China tested a hypersonic missile that is capable of carrying a nuclear payload. Citing 5 people familiar with the test, Financial Times reported on Saturday that in August, the Chinese military launched a Long March rocket that carried a hypersonic glide vehicle that flew through low-orbit space before cruising down towards its target. According to 3 people briefed on the intelligence, the test reportedly missed its target by about 24 miles, but was considered a success nonetheless by the 2 other sources who stated that the test showed that China had made astounding progress on hypersonic weapons and was far more advanced than U.S. officials realized. Well, I doubt that. They have very skilled intelligence in the U.S. military, and they know what's going on, believe me. We have no idea how they did this, one of the sources said. Pentagon spokesman John Kirby said he would not comment on the specifics of the report, but added, we have made clear our concerns about the military capabilities China continues to pursue, capabilities that only increase tensions in the region and beyond. That is one reason why we hold China as our #1 pacing challenge. Hypersonic weapons travel long distances through the atmosphere at speeds of Mach 5 through 10, making them invulnerable to any air or missile defense system. Conventional ballistic missiles fly at similar speeds but reach their target via a high hyperbolic arc. Hypersonic missiles fly in a much flatter arc, reaching their targets much more quickly while making them harder to track and intercept. Along with China, the United States, Russia, and at least 5 other countries are working on hypersonic technology. The test comes at a sensitive time when tensions are high, as China has made aggressive moves towards Taiwan. In addition, China and Russia are currently holding joint naval exercises in Russia's Peter the Great Gulf called Joint Sea 2021. Experts claim the exercise is a product of China and Russia being united in opposing the dominant U.S. influence in global affairs. Both countries have taken positions that are critical of the recent U.S. pullout from Afghanistan. Rabbi Pincus Winston, a prolific end-of-days author, noted that the destructive tendency has always been an aspect of mankind. This desire to create the ultimate weapon is the built-in inclination for men to take over the power to destroy from God. Rabbi Winston said, this was seen in the Tower of Babel and Nimrod. It's stupid and always explodes in their face, but it never goes away. China is off the grid more than Russia, more than any other country, Rabbi Winston said. They are paranoid and xenophobic, and they act on it to a degree that no other modern country does, even building concentration camps. I think that the U.S. is distracted by silly stuff while China has only one mandate, Rabbi Winston warned, to control the world. While the U.S. is watching Netflix, and I don't agree with this statement, the U.S. isn't sitting there watching Netflix. There's people that are in intelligence. They are high-ranking military that know what's going on. China is playing 3D chess with its economy, military, and technology. The rabbi noted that this acumen came from their biblical roots. Now, this is the part I really thought was important to get to. He says, we have the tradition that China comes from the sons of KETURAH, that Abraham gave gifts before sending them east. KETURAH was a concubine of Abraham. According to the book of Genesis, Abraham married KETURAH after the death of his first wife, Sarah. Abraham and KETURAH had 6 sons. Just as Ishmael was sent away, so as not to be a threat to Isaac, so too were the sons of KETURAH sent away. They were both powers of impurity. I think it's interesting that it mentions the number 6. The sons of KETURAH are the antimatter to Ishmael's matter. Ishmael is a threat in an overt way, loud and brash, and overpowering others through his brawn, through overt strength. The sons of KETURAH were a threat through their brains, and still are. China needs to control the world, and what we may be seeing is the beginning of the military aspect of their plans. Rabbi Winston cited a midrash brought in the book of Perk Eliyahu. In the midrash, the B'nai KETURAH, sons of KETURAH, come to the Temple Mount in the end of days. The Bible may also contain an anachronistic reference to China. I will pour out my anger upon Sin, the stronghold of Egypt, and I will destroy the wealth of No. I will set fire to Egypt. Sin shall writhe in anguish, and No shall be torn apart, and Noph shall face adversaries in broad daylight. Ezekiel 30:15 through 16. He says, in modern Hebrew, Sin is the name for China. So when you have the man of Sin, do you also have the man from China? And I already revealed that the moon was known as Sin. So I've always believed that it was going to be a Muslim, a believer in the crescent moon god Sin, that was going to be rising up as the Antichrist. It is interesting to note that according to Mongolian tradition, their nation was descended from Magog. The Mongolian Empire once included sections of Russia, China, and North Korea. The Chinese and all the minority groups living in China are of the Mongoloid race, which stems from Noah's son, Japheth. Entomologists have conjectured that the name Mongol is derived from the name Magog. What I find interesting about that is the Lord called Pharaoh the Great Dragon, and China is known by the dragon. So now you've got Egypt and China as dragons, and you've got them both being called Sin, China and Egypt. So let's just go to 2 Thessalonians, and I'll start reading chapter 2, starting in verse 1. Now we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, and by our gathering together unto him, that ye be not soon shaken in mind, or be troubled, neither by spirit, nor by word, nor by letter, as from us, as that the day of the Messiah is at hand. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he, as God, sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. So there you have the man of sin being revealed. Remember ye not that when I was yet with you I told you these things? And now ye know what withholdeth, that he might be revealed in his time. For the mystery of iniquity doth already work. Only he who now letteth will let, until he be taken out of the way. And then shall that wicked be revealed. What wicked? The one they were just talking about, the man of sin, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming, even him whose coming is after the working of Satan, with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they received not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this cause God shall send them strong delusion, that they should believe a lie, that they all might be damned who believed not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. But we are bound to give thanks always to God for you, brethren, beloved of the Lord, because God hath from the beginning chosen you to salvation through sanctification of the Spirit and belief of the truth, whereunto he called you by our gospel, to the obtaining of the glory of our Lord Jesus Christ, Yeshua the Messiah. Therefore, brethren, stand fast and hold the traditions which ye have been taught, whether by word or our epistle. Now our Lord Jesus Christ himself, and God, even our Father, which hath loved us, and hath given us everlasting consolation and good hope through grace, comfort your hearts and establish you in every good word and work. So if you type in the search box, is Magog the Mongolian people, it says, in fact, Gog and Magog were held by the Mongol to be their ancestors, at least by some segment of the population. So I've had to try making this video over several days, and so it's taking forever, just because I haven't been well and been out of it, and I wanted to finish it up, but I didn't like the way the first part was because I was really groggy in there. Let me finish. I wanted to start with this watchjerusalem.co.il, where they ask, is China in the Bible? This was written by David Vigil, May 29th of 2018, and they show a Great Wall of China, and it says the scriptural prophetic identity of the most populous nation on the planet. One of the greatest wonders of the world, the Great Wall stretches approximately 4,163 miles from east to west of China. And of course, they say that you can see the Great Wall of China from the space station, or, from space. They say China, the next superpower. China's America's #1 enemy. Such headlines have become common. It is logical that the nation with nearly 20% of the world's population, the second biggest economy and the biggest military in terms of manpower, would inspire such discussion. But will China become the world's next superpower? Hundreds of think tanks spend countless hours and vast sums of money in search of an answer to this question. Yet the Bible reveals the answer if they would only believe. The Bible is a book primarily about Israel, physical and spiritual. When other nations are mentioned, it's typically in relation to Israel. In biblical times, the interaction between the Chinese and the Israelites was of no major consequence, and so China was rarely mentioned. However, the Bible does speak prophetically of China's role in end-time events. Technological advances in communication and trade have shrunken the distance between China and the modern descendants of Israel considerably. For an explanation of who these nations are, request our free book, The United States and Britain in Prophecy. Today, China has considerable global influence. Witness, for example, the amount of U.S. debt China holds and the huge trade imbalance between the two nations, and the fact that China is the world's most dominant trading nation. An understanding of these prophecies hinges on knowing the biblical identity of the Chinese people. Before delving into this, however, we must gain a basic overview of Chinese history. A brief history of a great people. The Chinese people comprise one dominant ethnic group and many small minorities. Its ethnic Han comprise more than 90% of the 1.3 billion people living in China. Though minority ethnic groups such as the Uyghurs, Tibetans, Mongols, and Manchu make up a small percentage of the Chinese population, in absolute numbers they are still large populations. For example, there are actually more Mongols living in China than in Mongolia. These other ethnic groups have been absorbed into China through conquest by the Han Chinese. The Han have long dominated the heartland of China, usually defined by the Yellow River in the north and the Yangtze in the middle and the Pearl River on the south. This rich agricultural region is surrounded by border regions occupied by non-Han peoples such as Tibet, Xinjiang, home of the Muslim Uyghurs, Inner Mongolia, and Manchuria, and the historical name given to the territory north of North Korea. Historically, fierce nomadic cavalry armies from the northern border regions have posed a difficult challenge to the agriculture-based Chinese. The incursions motivated the building of the Great Wall. When the Han were strong, just like today, the border regions were under their rule. When they were weak, they lost control of those buffer regions and in some cases were even invaded by their Turkic and Mongol neighbors. The foreign invaders all achieved measures of success, controlling portions of Chinese territory for various periods, mainly in northern China. The most complete conquest was the Mongol invasion started by Genghis Khan in the 1200s AD. The resulting dynasty fully controlled China for a century. All these invasions had one thing in common, however. They all met their end by the Han Chinese. No matter which foreign invader occupied the throne, China always remained Chinese. One remarkable demonstration of the resilience of their society and culture was the survival amid all the invasions of the Chinese language, a feat few other languages have managed. This was partly due to the size of Han population. In 2 AD, the first available census shows a Chinese population of about 60 million, one-fourth of the world's population at the time. To better rule this immense population, nomadic invaders typically adopted Chinese administration techniques in the Chinese language, a language quite unrelated to their own. Eventually, their descendants adopted Chinese culture and the agricultural lifestyle as well. When the Han reasserted themselves, they easily absorbed the invaders that remained. All the mixing and migrating of different peoples has made it impossible to characterize what a pure ethnic Han is. Nevertheless, prophetically speaking, China refers to all the people of China, not just the Han ethnic group. And at any rate, the Chinese and all the minority groups living in China are of the Mongoloid race, which stems from Noah's son Japheth. As Herbert W. Armstrong taught, throughout his life, Noah's son Japheth married a woman of the yellow race and went on to father the Mongoloid people. The Hebrew word Japheth means enlargement, and a glance of the modern world shows that the Oriental populations have been enlarged and multiplied to an unparalleled degree. Japheth's descendants have long been the most populous people on earth, with the bulk living in China, Southeast Asia, and Japan. Genesis 10:2-5 shows that the enlargement of Japheth began with the patriarch himself, siring 7 sons and untold number of daughters. Obviously, these sons and daughters were a mix between the Caucasoid and Mongoloid races, the latter of which grew more definitive in subsequent generations. Soon after the dispersion at the Tower of Babel, Genesis 11:8, Japheth's descendants migrated through Central Asia to the lands they occupy now. One of the 7 sons of Japheth bears special importance to the prophetic identity of the Chinese and even their nomadic neighbors. That is Magog, the second son of Japheth in Genesis 10:2. Where did Magog go? Again, the Bible deals primarily with Israel, since Magog's descendants migrated to an area largely independent of the civilizations developing in the Middle East. No sons of Magog are listed in Scripture. However, Jewish historian Josephus indicated where Magog's descendants settled. He wrote in the 1st century, Magog founded those that from him were named Magogites, but who are by the Greeks called Scythians, the complete works of Josephus. In a prophecy in Ezekiel 38, the Bible labels this vast territory of northern Eurasia, where the Scyths live, a region that stretched from the Russian steppes to modern-day China and Mongolia as Magog. This territory contained many different tribes of people of the white and yellow races, all of whom were called Scyths or Scythians by the Greeks. The Ezekiel 38 prophecy demonstrates this as well, listing numerous nations and peoples associated with or dwelling in the land of Magog. The people who most predominantly settled this land are typically identified as Mongolic and Turkic. The name Mongol is even derived from the name Magog. The ancient history of this land is a story about different Turkic and Mongolic tribes vying for control of the area. Whenever a tribe grew strong enough, it would rule the area in rare cases, such as with the Huns, Seljuk, Turks, and Mongols. If these nomadic tribes consolidated enough power, they conquered lands beyond their own. The resulting conquest led to much cultural and genetic intermixing with the people of Central Asia and makes their national borders largely irrelevant to defining their ethnic backgrounds. Today, the land the Bible calls Magog is dominated in the west by Russia, which is reasserting control over the region it once possessed through the USSR, and China in the east. Details of ancient history of Magog and its people remain obscure, since the Turks and Mongols didn't develop a written language until after their contact with the Chinese or Persian civilizations. Though these nomadic peoples have a sketchy history, they still play an important role in understanding China's prophetic role. While the Mongols' connection to Magog is most obvious, they were just one tribe of a related people that carry the biblical name Magog. Ezekiel 38 is a prophecy about the land of Magog and all the distant cousins that live there and are associated with each other, such as the Russians and Chinese. One of the Mongolithic nomadic tribes in this area bears a special relationship with China. They are the Khitan, a people responsible for China's modern name and one of China's biblical names, Kitim. China is Kitim. Isaiah 23:1 has a prophecy about the land of Kitim. To which modern nation does this end-time prophecy apply? China is Kitim. They are the Khitan, a people responsible for China's modern name and one of China's biblical names, Kitim. China is Kitim. Isaiah 23:1 has a prophecy about the land of Kitim. To which modern nation does this end-time prophecy apply? This biblical name refers to both the island of Cyprus and to the nation of China, whose progenitors first populated Cyprus and gave it its name. Boy, that's news. Jewish historian Josephus records that some descendants of Japheth, such as the families of Gomer, Tubal, and Togarmah, first settled in southern Europe before migrating east into Asia. Kitim was one such family, originally settling lands to the west of Mesopotamia before moving to the Far East. Genesis 10:4 lists the sons of Japheth's fourth-born son. The sons of Javan were Elisha, Tarshish, Kitim, and Dodanim. Kitim is synonymous with the Kitim of Isaiah's prophecy, and they're spelling it two different ways, Kittim or Chittim in Isaiah's prophecy. Verse 5 mentions that these sons of Javan settled in the isles or the coasts. This occurred shortly after the dispersion of the Tower of Babel, when the sons of Javan migrated to the northern Mediterranean. These tribes gave their names to various cities and islands, such as Cyprus and Rhodes. The Mongoloid families, including the Ketim, did not stay in the Mediterranean, however. Over hundreds of years and many generations, some of these families migrated east into Asia from Cyprus, where they were found today, according to research by Dr. Ernest Martin, formerly of Ambassador College. The descendants of Javan's son Ketim came to Asia sometime after many of their cousins had already settled there. After their migration through Central Asia, the Ketim made their appearance in modern-day northern China and Mongolia under the name Khitan. In the 4th century AD, in the 10th century, the Khitan people managed to create a dynasty that subjugated the people, including the Chinese, in modern-day northern China. Their territory stretched from what is now Korea to East Kazakhstan, including Beijing, the seat of government in China today. Because the Khitan controlled the overland trade and communication route from China through Central Asia to Europe, China was called Cathay after the Khitans. The designation first applied to North China, but later designated all of China. It is a name the Russians still use for China today. And that's spelled C-A-T-H-A-Y, kind of like Kathy, but a little bit different there. Isaiah 23, 1 through 3 reveal that Ketim, modern-day China, will form a part of a global economic market along with Europe, one that is prophesied to shut out the nations of Israel. It should be no surprise that China will be an integral part of this economic partnership with Europe, as it is now the world's greatest exporter. These two trading blocs are consolidating domination over the global economy. And don't forget about the port that Israel is letting China run now on the coast of Israel. And I think they're making a huge mistake. They're letting them have inroads in the land of Israel. The history of the Khitan demonstrates what has happened to many of the Mongolic tribes that once roamed the western portions of what the Bible calls Magog. These nomadic tribes were not considered Chinese when they were conquering the Han civilization, but after centuries of living inside China's borders, much of their populations have been ethnically absorbed by the Han Chinese. Whatever remnants of these Mongolic nomads that have managed to remain distinct, such as the Mongols, are now classified as ethnic minorities in China. In the Khitans' case, their absorption was so complete that the ethnic minority group from their descendants doesn't even exist. The history of these nomads shows just how strong a connection China has with biblical Magog. To a certain degree, they even share the same borders and the same people. But if this explains the Mongolic nomads whose descendants now live in northern China, what about the original Han people who settled and continue to live in China's heartland? The history of the Han Chinese is much less obscure. In fact, the Han people record their history all the way back to the time of the Tower of Babel. Ancient Chinese records speak of China's first emperors, Yao, Shun, and Yu. One such record, the Shu King, explains that one of Yao's tasks was to deal with the effects of a great flood that ravaged the land. Destructive in their overflow are the waters of the inundation. In their vast extent, they embrace the mountains and overtop the hills. While scholars explain the inundation as a local flood in China, it's clear from the biblical account, God's sacred word, that these annals are talking about Noah's flood. Consider, during Yao's lifetime, a new leader, Shun, came to power. According to another ancient Chinese manuscript, the Bamboo Annals, Shun is described as having a black body. He was obviously not Chinese, and his mother was called the Queen Mother of the West, indicating him as a foreigner. The Shu King gives the name of Shun's father as Kuso. According to Dr. Herman Ho's Compendium of World History, this Shun was none other than the Nimrod of the Bible. Therefore, Kuso, which also can be spelled Kusou, is Nimrod's father, Cush, and the queen mother of the West can only be Semiramis. She was the mother wife of Nimrod, who called herself Queen of Heaven, as documented in Alexander Hislop's Two Babylons. These are the three principal figures of man's rebellion at the Tower of Babel. Wow, that's really something, isn't it? Then it says Nimrod was a son of Cush and was of the black race. The Bible describes him as a mighty rebellious leader who caused the people to revolt against God shortly after the flood in Genesis 10:8-9. He gathered the different races and peoples together to build the Tower of Babel, but was stopped when God intervened and confused the languages in Genesis 11:1-7. The different races and peoples were then scattered to different areas of the world. At that point, Yu became the next ruler. Yu, China's first great hero, founded the Ji dynasty from that point forward. Leadership was given on the hereditary basis. The return of government to a Chinese ruler indicates that the Chinese immediately left the area of Babel and broke free from Nimrod and his successors' rule. Under Chinese rulers, they migrated to their modern-day location. Now, isn't that interesting that today's Chinese leader has that same name? Xi. The chronology, as presented in the Shu King, places the rules of these three kings towards the end of the 3rd millennia BC. The Chinese classics, this time frame also agrees with the Bible. The Chinese have preserved the most complete secular history of their civilization, dating back more than 4,000 years. There is a lot of myth and legend included as well, but the general chronology of emperors is verified by archaeological finds, as well as what is recorded in scripture. Archaeological proof. Western scholars and the Chinese themselves, heavily influenced by Western thought after the 1920s, believed the Ji dynasty and the history immediately following were mere inventions, mythical heroes and kingdoms. However, an archaeological find in the 1959 in Erlitou in the western part of the Henan province revealed an early Chinese society dating back to the same time and place that the Shu King records the Ji dynasty existed. The city found, Erlitou, is the largest of all cities found dating to this time period and is believed to be the capital city of the Ji government. Since that find in the North China Plain off the Yellow River, archaeologists have found some 200 sites revealing the same culture throughout a broad area, demonstrating a rapid settlement and urbanization during the years 1900 to 1500 BC. This was the formation of the first Chinese state. It says, in parentheses, the Chinese Neolithic trajectories to early states. The Bamboo Annals records the existence of other Chinese states and how the Ji rulers expanded their control over them. Archaeologists have found evidence of other Chinese states, but none contained as many settlements as those closely identified with the city found in Erlitou, where Ji ruled, clearly the center of power of the first post-flood Chinese civilization. Interestingly, the archaeological record shows a period of extremely low population settlement in the period immediately before the Erlitou culture arrived. The archaeologists steeped in evolutionary thought call the time before the flood the Neolithic period. They have found evidence of a thriving civilization in China in this time period, followed by a contradiction in settlement with evidence pointing to drastic flooding in the region. Though the archaeologists won't admit it, this is evidence of a great flood followed by a resettlement of the area led by the Ji dynasty. Back to Gog and Magog. So if history is clear that Shun is Nimrod, Who are Yao and Yu? How do these names fit in our biblical identity? A basic understanding of Ezekiel 38 gives us that information. That chapter speaks of the land of Magog and specific people or peoples living in that land. Son of man, set thy face against Gog, the land of Magog. Verse 2. When Arab historians talked of the Mongols, they used the terms Yagog and Magog. According to Dr. Hoth, Yao in Chinese history is likely the same person the Arabs called Yagog in their tradition. Every prophetic indication is that China has a strong connection with Gog and Magog. Ezekiel 38 too refers to China, along with Russia. China dominates the entire area of Magog and is associated with the nations listed in subsequent verses. Therefore, the Chinese Han people were ruled first by a Japhethic descendant associated with Magog, possibly his son, though the Bible doesn't say specifically. During Nimrod's rebellion at the Tower of Babel, the Chinese were ruled by Nimrod. After his reign, when God intervened and changed the languages, government over the Chinese returned to the Japhethic line under Yu's rule. These people then migrated north and east to modern-day China, setting up their capital in the North China Plain at the end of the 3rd millennia BC. The location of China helps reveal other biblical identities as well. Then it says kings of the east. In a prophecy recorded in Daniel 11, a clash is foretold between the king of the north, a German-led European power, and the king of the south, a radical Islamic power led by Iran. These prophetic identities are explained in our booklets, The Holy Roman Empire and Prophecy, and The King of the South, all free upon request, it says. Emerging victorious, the European army is then prophesied to conquer the tiny Jewish nation now called Israel. At that point, verse 44 foretells, tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble this European king. Any map will show that north and east of Jerusalem are Russia and China, the two dominant powers of the land biblically referred to as Magog. This event is further expounded on throughout various biblical passages, and it's also prophesied that the kings of the east will gather an army that number 200 million soldiers. Such a vast army could only be assembled with the massive population of China. Clearly, China is one of those kings of the east. So back to our original question, will China become the world's next dominating superpower after the decline of the U.S.? The answer is no. Though it will grow to tremendous world power, even superpower status, especially through economic means as indicated in Isaiah 23, it will not rise to the top spot. That position will be filled by the European power led by Germany. After a short economic partnership, China will violently contend with the king of the north for global dominance. But this war will end when the Messiah comes and destroys both powers. After that, according to biblical prophecy, the Messiah will restore his government on earth, a government that will bring peace and prosperity for 1,000 years. Yet Ezekiel 38 prophesies that not every nation will submit to his rule voluntarily. Soon after his coming, the people of Asia will form an army in order to attack the people living in Jerusalem. This will be the last great rebellion in the 1,000-year period. The Messiah will utterly destroy it and deliver his people. It is a grand statement from God. Thus will I magnify myself and sanctify myself, and I will be known in the eyes of many nations, and they shall know that I am the Lord. Ezekiel 38:23. Believing the Bible gives us an understanding of ancient Chinese history that scholars reject and reveals the future status of China and major events this world power will participate in. But even more, it gives us the final and inspiring end result, the Messiah establishing his kingdom on earth. God is offering the wonderful opportunity to know him now, to know who is Lord, Horrible wars are prophesied to occur shortly, but God will deliver his people, those who know he's the Lord and rely on him. That should lead to the next big question. Are you one of those? Now let me just add this. One thing that's really interesting that I discovered is that in the Quran, they mention this one along the history of Gog and Magog. You had this in Arabic in the Quran, this character, Du'al Karnain. This is he of the two horns who traveled to the east and west and erects a wall between a certain people and Gog and Magog. It says elsewhere the Quran tells how the end of the world would be signaled by the release of Gog and Magog from behind the wall. And other apocalyptic writings report their destruction by God in a single night would usher in the day of resurrection. And why is that interesting? Because the wall that they're talking about, that he erects a wall between a certain people and Gog and Magog, they believe that's the Great Wall of China. And apparently Marco Polo wrote about this wall and having to do with Magog. But this person out of the Islamic Quran, he is called, and I won't say the name, it's Dhalqarnayn. So I would say it's Du'al Karnain. But that means he of the two horns. So put that together with this verse in Revelation 13:11. Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. So we know that China is the dragon, and this one with the two horns is from the Islamic tradition, and the wall was built to keep certain invaders out. That's the Great Wall of China. That's why this beast that's coming up out of the earth had the two horns like a lamb, but he spake as a dragon, because they all were battling each other in points of history, and the Great Wall was built to keep these invaders out. So that right there, even though it's been interpreted completely differently in the past, a lot of people say that the Pope's the one that has two horns like a lamb, but I don't think so. But I think it's Islamic tradition, that Du'al Karnayn. I hope I'm saying his name right. He's the one who dealt with Gog and Magog in the past, and the Great Wall of China was built to keep these invaders out. So this Du'al Karnayn from the Quran, he appears and says he is he of two horns. So this is the beast, combination of Islam and China, the dragon, in the last days, one of the beasts that comes up out of the earth. So I just wanted to share this because some of this has been interpreted differently all these years because people didn't know and they didn't have the knowledge that we have today and access to the historical records like this that are available online. And now this is being revealed. So it's pretty evident that the Xi dynasty is still ongoing. There's one who's been calling himself God and telling people not to worship Jesus there in China, but to worship him instead. And we can see how all of this is fitting together like puzzle pieces in such an incredible way. So anyway, I hope that this was enlightening for the end times, and I just think it's incredible that all of this is coming forth. So I think that Magog has been identified clearly and utterly. So this is clearly an incredible revelation of who these people are for the last days end time events. And interesting how they're going to fight Jesus Christ, the Messiah of Israel himself. And he will subdue all of these people and set up his kingdom. So we know that time is short and we keep looking up. I hope that this was very interesting to you, and you will just give me a thumbs up, support my channel, subscribe to my channel, share my video. I pray that this has just revealed something to you didn't know before, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye. And thanks for praying for me, because I've been really battling illness and I'm hopefully on the mend. So I'll talk to you soon. Bye.